I thought I had the perfect life. Ryan and I had been together since high school. We bought a small house in Ohio, decorated every corner together, and dreamed about starting a family one day. He was kind, funny, and the man everyone said I was lucky to have. But lately, something had changed. He stopped coming home for dinner, his phone was always face down, and he smiled less. I kept telling myself it was just stress from work, but deep down, I felt something dark was coming. One morning, while cleaning the kitchen, I felt dizzy and sat down. My jeans felt tight even though I hadn't gained weight. A few days later, my stomach looked swollen. Ryan brushed it off, saying, "You've just been eating more takeout lately." I laughed it away, but the swelling got worse. I started to worry. The first doctor said it could be hormonal. The second told me it might be bloating from stress. I tried to believe them, but each morning my reflection scared me. My stomach looked almost pregnant, yet every test said I wasn't. I cried one night, asking Ryan to come with me for another appointment. He refused, saying I was being dramatic. That hurt more than anything. Weeks passed, and I noticed something strange. The nurse at the clinic mentioned Ryan had been there earlier asking about my results. Why would he do that? He wasn't even with me that day. My heart sank, but I didn't say anything. I needed to know the truth first. When he left for a business trip, I finally gathered the courage to look through his home office. The drawers were locked, but I found the key in one of his old coats. Inside, I found folders with my medical files, hospital test copies, and bottles of pills with my name on them, but I had never taken those. I couldn't understand what I was looking at. The labels were scratched off. It felt like my body went cold. That night, I couldn't sleep. When Ryan returned, I tried to act normal. I asked him gently if he knew anything about the pills. His face changed instantly. He shouted, saying I was snooping and that I was losing my mind. I wanted to believe him, but the fear in his eyes told me he was hiding something big. A few days later, my best friend Lauren came to visit. When she saw how weak I looked, she couldn't stop crying. She told me she'd overheard a conversation between Ryan and his coworker Monica. They were testing some new fertility drug on women without permission, and Ryan had used it on me to see if it worked. My whole world shattered in that moment. The man I trusted with my life had turned me into an experiment. My stomach wasn't growing from life, it was growing from poison. I sat there numb, staring at the walls, feeling like the person I used to be had already died. The next few weeks felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. After hearing what Lauren told me, I couldn't stop shaking. Everything around me felt fake. Ryan acted normal, like nothing had happened. He kissed me goodbye every morning, brought flowers one evening, and pretended to care. But when I looked at him, I only saw a stranger. I didn't confront him yet. I wanted proof. I went back to the doctor, but this time, I asked for all my reports myself. When I looked at the paperwork, I noticed something strange. There were extra blood tests done that I hadn't approved. Some had Ryan's signature on them. I felt sick to my stomach. I took the documents home and hid them in a drawer. My heart pounded every time I heard his car in the driveway. One night, while Ryan was asleep, I checked his phone. There were deleted messages between him and Monica, but I managed to recover a few. They talked about dosage, timing, and how my body was reacting faster than expected. I couldn't breathe. He was experimenting on me, the woman he promised to protect. Tears fell down my face as I quietly backed away from the bed. The next morning, I pretended everything was normal. I cooked breakfast, smiled, and packed his lunch. I just needed time to figure out what to do. Lauren helped me take photos of the documents and messages. She knew a lawyer named Daniel, who specialized in medical abuse cases. He told us to stay quiet for now and gather as much proof as possible. My health was getting worse. My stomach ached all the time, and sometimes I felt like fainting. Ryan didn't notice, or maybe he didn't care. He spent more nights out, claiming he was at the lab. I barely slept. Every sound in the house made me jump. I was afraid he might do something worse if he found out what I knew. One evening, while Ryan was in the shower, I went into his briefcase. There were contracts, lab notes, and even a printed photo of a check. He had made a deal to sell the formula to an investor. My name was written in one of the reports, test subject EP. I froze. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was a project. When he came out of the bathroom, I tried to act calm, but he saw the papers in my hand. His face turned pale, then hard. He grabbed my wrist and shouted, demanding to know what I'd seen. I pulled free and ran outside. My heart raced so fast I thought I'd collapse. I drove straight to Lauren's house that night and never went back. For the first time in months, I felt both broken and free. The man I loved had turned me into something less than human. But I knew one thing now, he wasn't going to get away with it. I stayed with Lauren for a while. Her guest room became my safe place, even though I could barely sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's face when he realized I had found out. I kept thinking about how easily he lied to me, how calm he was while watching me get sicker. My body still hurt, and I had to visit the hospital again because of stomach pain. The doctors said I needed treatment right away. My organs were under stress from whatever drug had been used on me. Lauren stayed by my side the whole time. She held my hand through every appointment, helped me eat when I couldn't, and reminded me that I wasn't alone. I told her I wanted to go to the police, but Daniel, the lawyer, said we had to be careful. He explained that we needed to prove that Ryan had done all this intentionally. If we rushed, Ryan might destroy the evidence. So, we waited and gathered everything slowly. Ryan tried to contact me. He called, texted, and even came to Lauren's house once. I didn't open the door. I listened from behind the curtain while he begged, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that he loved me. His voice made me sick. Daniel said to block him completely and let him dig his own grave. He was right. Within a week, Ryan sent me an email full of threats and apologies mixed together. That message became a piece of evidence. Over time, I began to recover a little. The swelling finally started to go down. The doctors said my body was healing but warned that the drug might have caused lasting damage. I tried not to think about that part. I just wanted my strength back. Lauren kept me busy. We organized all the files, printed out photos, and labeled everything clearly. It made me feel like I was taking back control of my life. Then one morning, Daniel called with news. The company Ryan worked for had started an internal review because someone leaked information about illegal experiments. That someone was Monica. She had turned against Ryan after realizing he planned to take all the credit and money. She gave the investigators everything, the formulas, the dosage notes, even recordings of their meetings. When I heard that, I felt both relief and anger. Relief that someone had finally spoken up, and anger that she only did it after everything went wrong. Still, it meant Ryan was cornered. He lost his job within days and disappeared again. Daniel told me not to worry, that the case was getting stronger. Even though I was finally safe, part of me still felt broken. Some nights I'd sit by the window, holding a cup of tea, thinking about the woman I used to be, trusting, hopeful, in love. That version of me was gone forever. But another part of me, the one that had survived all this, was growing stronger each day. The days after Ryan disappeared were quiet, but my heart still carried noise. Even when the house was silent, my mind kept replaying everything he had done. Daniel was working on the legal part, and I focused on trying to live again. Some mornings I forced myself to take short walks, even though my body still felt weak. The air helped me breathe a little easier. I was learning how to exist without fear. Lauren was like my anchor. She reminded me to eat, made me laugh when I wanted to cry, and kept me from falling apart. One afternoon, she told me there was an update. The authorities had found Ryan's secret lab equipment stored in a rented space outside town. The labels matched the drugs found in my system. That proof made the case stronger. I felt a strange mix of pain and peace. At least now people would believe me. When Daniel came over, he said we needed to go public with the charges. It was time to file a formal case against Ryan and his company. He warned me it wouldn't be easy. Trials take time, and Ryan might try to intimidate me again. I told him I was ready. I wasn't that scared woman anymore. I had lost too much already, there was nothing left to fear. The following week, I met with the investigators. They asked many questions about Ryan, about our marriage, and about the strange things I had noticed before my health declined. It was hard to speak about it all, but I forced myself to stay calm. When they asked if I wanted to press full charges, I didn't hesitate. I said yes. That was the moment I finally took my life back. News of the case spread fast around town. Some people looked at me with pity, others whispered when I passed by. I ignored them. I didn't owe anyone explanations. My focus was on justice. Daniel told me Ryan's lawyer had reached out, asking for a deal, but I refused. I didn't want silence or money. I wanted the truth to come out. The first hearing was set a month later. I spent that time preparing emotionally. At night, I'd sit on the porch and write down my thoughts in a small notebook. I wrote about strength, fear, and the kind of pain that changes a person forever. I knew facing Ryan again would be hard, but I needed to do it. When the day came, I wore simple clothes and walked into the courthouse with my head high. Lauren squeezed my hand before I entered. I saw Ryan across the room, his once confident face now pale and nervous. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the woman he underestimated. I was there to finish what he started, and this time, I wasn't backing down. When the trial finally started, I felt nervous but ready. I had waited so long for this moment, and now everything I had suffered through was going to be heard. The courtroom was quiet when I walked in. Ryan sat across from me in a dark suit, pretending to be calm, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He looked smaller than I remembered, like the power he once had over me was gone. Daniel stood beside me, confident and focused. He told me to stay strong, to remember why I was there. The judge entered, and the case began. Ryan's lawyer tried to paint him as a misunderstood scientist, someone who made mistakes but never meant harm. Hearing those words made me angry. I wanted to shout, but Daniel gently touched my arm, reminding me to stay composed. When it was my turn to speak, my hands shook, but my voice stayed steady. I told the court about how my health had changed, about the lies, and about the day I found the pills with my name on them. I explained how I trusted Ryan with my life and how he used that trust to hurt me. The room was silent the entire time. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I didn't care. I just wanted them to know the truth. Monica was called next. She looked nervous as she took the stand. She admitted that Ryan had used me as a test subject without consent. She told the court about the hidden lab and how Ryan planned to sell the formula for money. Her voice trembled when she said she was sorry for not stopping him sooner. Hearing her confession hurt, but it also gave me closure. Finally, someone else was saying what I had known all along. Daniel presented the documents, emails, and test reports. Each piece of evidence connected Ryan directly to the illegal experiment. His lawyer tried to fight back, but there was too much proof. Ryan's calm act started to fade. He glared at me once, but I didn't look away. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. After several long days, the trial reached its end. The judge read the decision slowly. Ryan was found guilty of medical malpractice, fraud, and endangerment. He was sentenced to years in prison and ordered to pay damages. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted him to face the consequences. When it was finally over, I stepped outside and took a deep breath. The sun felt warm on my skin, and for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel heavy. Lauren hugged me tightly, whispering that it was done. I looked at the courthouse one last time, not with anger, but with peace. Ryan had taken so much from me, but he couldn't take my strength. I had fought back, and I had won. After the trial, life moved slowly. The noise, the attention, the court hearings, all of it had drained me. I stayed in a small apartment for a while, away from everything that reminded me of Ryan. The first few days felt strange. I didn't have to look over my shoulder or worry about what he was hiding. The silence felt different now, peaceful. Lauren helped me move my things. We packed only what mattered, a few clothes, some books, and the notebook I used to write my thoughts. I left everything else behind. It felt good to let go. At night, I sat by the window and tried to imagine a future where my life wasn't defined by pain. For the first time in years, I felt a small spark of hope. The doctors continued to check on me. They said my body had recovered better than expected, though there were still risks. I listened quietly, thankful to even be alive. My energy slowly returned. I began to walk more, cook for myself, and do small things that made me feel normal again. Daniel visited once to finalize some legal documents. He told me that Ryan's company had shut down completely. The investigation revealed more hidden experiments, and others had come forward with their stories. Knowing I wasn't the only one made me sad, but it also reminded me that speaking up had been worth it. I had helped stop something terrible from happening to others. Lauren often talked about taking a short trip somewhere quiet, maybe the countryside. At first, I hesitated, but she convinced me. We went for a few days, and I remember standing by a lake one morning, watching the sunrise. I hadn't seen something that beautiful in a long time. It made me realize I was still here, broken, but alive. When we came back, I started volunteering at a local women's center. I met people who had gone through their own kinds of pain, betrayal, abuse, loss. Listening to them made me stronger. I didn't share my story at first, but when I finally did, they listened closely. It felt like releasing a heavy weight from my chest. Months passed, and my routine became stable. I learned to sleep through the night again. I learned to laugh without feeling guilty. Sometimes, memories of Ryan tried to creep back, but they didn't control me anymore. They were just shadows of a life I no longer lived. One evening, as I stood on my small balcony, I realized that revenge hadn't been the real victory. Survival was. I had turned my pain into strength. My scars were proof of what I had endured and overcome. The woman I was before no longer existed, but the one who replaced her was stronger, wiser, and free. Months turned into a year, and my life slowly started to look normal again. I had moved into a small house outside the city. It was quiet, surrounded by trees, and far from everything that once hurt me. I liked waking up to the sound of birds instead of hospital machines or courtroom noise. Every morning, I made coffee, opened the windows, and reminded myself that I was still standing. Lauren still visited often. She became more like family than a friend. Sometimes we'd sit in the backyard, talking about random things, avoiding the past as much as possible. She said I looked happier, stronger. Maybe she was right, though some nights I still woke up from bad dreams. But instead of crying, I'd sit up, breathe, and tell myself, "You're safe now." It worked most nights. Daniel also kept in touch. He helped me finish the last bit of paperwork from the case and encouraged me to keep speaking to the women at the center. I started leading small group talks every week. Sharing my story no longer felt painful, it felt like power. When the women told me their stories, I saw pieces of myself in them, the fear, the confusion, and the quiet hope of starting over. Helping them helped me heal too. One day, I received a letter from the state office. It said Ryan had appealed his sentence, but the court had denied it. Reading that gave me a strange kind of peace. It wasn't joy, it was relief. I didn't want revenge anymore, I just wanted distance, and I finally had it. I tore the letter and threw it away. That chapter of my life was closed for good. I started taking small steps toward rebuilding my dreams. Before everything happened, I had wanted to study counseling. So I enrolled in a part-time course. Being around people again felt strange at first, but I liked it. It reminded me that the world still had kindness in it. I studied hard, and each time I passed a test, I felt a little piece of my confidence return. The house slowly became a home. I planted flowers in the backyard, painted the walls soft colors, and filled the rooms with light. Every corner had something new that represented who I was now, calm, stronger, and more patient. I still kept the small notebook I used to write in during the hardest days. Sometimes, I'd read old pages and smile. That scared, broken woman had become someone she would have been proud of. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, I sat outside with a cup of tea. The air was cool, and the world felt still. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for anything bad to happen. I realized healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about learning to live again. And I was finally doing that, one quiet day at a time. A few years had passed since everything happened, and I had finally found peace in my new life. I was working part-time as a counselor at the women's center. Most of the people who came in were broken in some way, but they all carried a quiet kind of strength. Every story I heard reminded me how far I had come. My scars no longer felt like something to hide, they were proof that I had survived. One afternoon, as I was finishing a session, Lauren stopped by. She looked excited and handed me an envelope. It was an invitation to speak at a conference about recovery and justice. My first thought was to say no. I didn't like attention, and talking about my past in front of strangers scared me. But Lauren said, "You could change lives by telling what you lived through." That night, I sat in bed thinking about it. She was right. If my pain could help even one person, then it was worth it. The day of the conference, I felt nervous. Standing on that stage, looking at all those faces waiting to hear me, my hands trembled a little. But once I started speaking, the fear faded. I talked about trust, betrayal, and healing. I told them that sometimes the person who breaks you also teaches you who you really are. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment, then everyone clapped. A few people came up to me afterward, some in tears, thanking me for being honest. It felt like closure. Later that year, I got a letter from Daniel. He was moving to another state and wanted to say goodbye. He thanked me for trusting him and said I had inspired him to take more cases that protect people from medical abuse. Reading his words made me proud. He had helped me get justice, but in some way, I had helped him too. Life became simple again. I spent weekends at the park, sometimes painting or reading by the lake. I even started volunteering at a local shelter for women and children. Being surrounded by people who were trying to rebuild their lives made me appreciate every moment. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. Sometimes, late at night, I still thought about Ryan. Not with anger, but with distance. He was a part of my story, but no longer part of my life. I had forgiven myself for not seeing the truth sooner. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, it meant freeing myself from the weight of hate. One evening, while closing the center, I looked around at the quiet room filled with soft light. I felt calm, stronger than ever. I realized I had turned the worst thing that ever happened to me into something meaningful. My life had started from pain, but it had grown into purpose, and that was the best revenge I could have ever asked for. Time continued to move forward, and so did I. My work at the center became a big part of my life. Every day I met people who reminded me how strong the human heart could be. I listened to women who had lost everything and were still standing. I helped them find jobs, rebuild confidence, and start again. Watching them heal gave me strength. I no longer felt like a victim, I was someone who understood pain and could guide others out of it. One afternoon, a new woman came in. Her name was Grace, and she looked terrified, the same way I had once looked. She told me she was afraid to leave her husband, who controlled everything she did. As she spoke, I saw my past reflected in her eyes. I held her hand and told her she could get through it. We made a plan to help her find safety. Seeing her smile weekly before leaving that day reminded me why I kept doing this work. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about giving others hope. A few months later, I was offered a full-time position at the center. It felt like a reward for all the battles I had fought and won. Lauren and I celebrated with a small dinner at my place. We talked for hours about how much had changed since those dark days. She told me she admired my strength. I told her I wouldn't have survived without her. Our bond had turned into something deep and unbreakable. Sometimes, when I walked home in the evening, I'd catch the scent of spring flowers and think about how different life felt now. The fear that once ruled my days was gone. I could finally breathe freely, laugh without guilt, and dream again. One weekend, I visited the town where Ryan and I had once lived. It felt strange walking through the old streets. The house we had shared looked smaller, almost empty. I stood across the road for a while, remembering the woman who had lived there, trusting, loving, and blind to the truth. I whispered a quiet goodbye before turning away. It felt like closing the last door that had been left open. After that trip, I stopped thinking about the past so much. My focus was the future, my work, my friends, and the quiet life I had built. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before the marriage. The colors felt alive in my hands, and every painting I finished felt like a new chapter written in peace. One night, sitting by the window with a cup of tea, I looked up at the sky. The stars were bright and endless. I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had found. My pain had once defined me, but now it was only a shadow behind the light I carried within. I was finally free, not just from Ryan, but from the version of myself that believed I couldn't survive without him. Years passed quietly, and life found its rhythm again. The pain had faded into distant memories, and the person I had become was nothing like the one who once cried in fear. My days were peaceful now. I woke up early, made breakfast, and watched the sunrise from my porch. The air felt lighter, and so did my heart. I had learned that healing doesn't happen all at once. It grows slowly, like morning light spreading across the sky. My work at the center continued to fill my days. We had expanded, and now there were more women coming in, more lives being rebuilt. I often stayed late, listening to stories, offering comfort, and helping with small steps forward. Every time someone thanked me, I thought about how far I had come, from being broken to being a guide for others. That thought always made me smile. Lauren had moved to another city for her job, but we talked every week. She never stopped reminding me of how strong I was. On weekends, she sometimes visited, and we'd cook together like old times. Those visits always brought warmth back into the house. It reminded me that friendship could heal wounds that medicine never could. One evening, after finishing work, I took a long walk through the park. The sunset painted the sky in soft orange and gold. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes for a moment, listening to children laughing nearby. I realized that peace doesn't mean forgetting the past, it means making peace with it. The hurt no longer had control over me. It had shaped me, but it didn't define me anymore. Sometimes I still thought about Ryan, but it wasn't with anger. It was more like remembering a story that happened to someone else. He was just a part of the road that led me here. Without his betrayal, I might never have found my own strength. Pain had become my teacher, and from it, I had learned how to stand tall even when the world tried to break me. A few months later, I decided to move again, this time to a small town near the coast. The sea always calmed me. I rented a tiny house overlooking the water. At night, I could hear the waves hitting the rocks, steady and endless. I'd sit on the porch with my tea, wrapped in a blanket, and feel the wind on my face. That sound reminded me that life always moves forward, no matter how rough it gets. One night, as the moonlight reflected on the ocean, I smiled to myself. My stomach, once swollen from pain, was now calm. My heart, once shattered, was whole. I whispered softly into the wind, I made it. The waves answered with a soft roar, and I knew it was true. I had turned my suffering into strength, and in doing so, I had finally found peace.